Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. Welcome to another video. Hello, granola. Hi everyone. Oops, I just revealed something. Whoops. I'm here today with a very serious and important video. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. Welcome to an extremely serious video for the week. Actually, it's one of the funnest ones to make throughout the year, and I'm imagining that most of you who watch my channel are watching all kinds of fun videos made by booktubers who are attempting to predict the 16 books that will be included in the Women's Prize long list for fiction. So the Women's Prize for Fiction long list is set to be announced on March 4th, which is just around the corner. So here I have I've actually written them out on cards, my 16 books that are in my predictions. I only made my first Women's Prize predictions video a year ago, so it's not something that I feel that I have mastered in any sense. And it is a little bit of a strange thing to do when you're trying to select books that you've not read. I've not read any of the books that I have here in my predictions list. And when you're considering books that are a mix of past winners, or what we like to refer to as heavy hitters, representing a range of different experiences across a diverse set of cultures, as well as representing the range of writing styles and experiences of women. So it's quite a daunting task. I'm quite sure that quite a few of the books that I have chosen you will find on other people's lists. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time elaborating on each of these selections, just because you've probably heard about some of them already. So yeah, the other thing is, if I get anything wrong, I will say this: if I missed something or I got anything incorrect, please don't be nervous to correct me. I am not perfect, and I did this rather quickly. So let me know in the comments if I've mistaken anything. I do believe that the books that I've selected are all eligible. Oh, the eligibility period is April 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025, just in case anyone was wondering. And the book has to be written by a woman and published in the UK in that time period. Oh, and short stories are not allowed. Yeah, so I guess without any more preamble, I will jump in and, as I said last year, throw my hat in the ring. And it's always fun to make this video because you can go back and look when the list comes out to see if you had any correct, which is always fun. I think last year I might have gotten as many as 5 correct predictions, which I was very chuffed about. I'm not sure if I'll have those kind of numbers again this year, but again, it's really fun to speculate. So I'm just gonna shuffle my cards. I'm telling you, I haven't really looked at anyone's videos yet. The only video that I watched is the early on Scott made a video, and I did watch that, but I try to stay away from the predictions so that it doesn't influence me. But it's difficult because everyone's publishing their lists right now. So I'm really keen to get this film edited and presented to you, and then get online and see what everyone else is predicting and make comparisons. So with that being said, please let me know in the comments below what you think of the list that I'm going to present to you, and what other people are saying, or what your predictions might be. I'd be very curious to know. So the first book on my list is The Lost Love Songs of Boise Singh. This is a story about 4 women's lives that are interconnected by their link to this infamous gangster. I think it's based on a real character who was a gangster and a con man. It's by a Trinidadian author, so it's set in Trinidad and Tobago, and this guy was a gangster con man in the 1950s. That's really all I know about this one. I've heard nothing but praise for it. I feel like the novel is one that might be interesting for consideration for the Women's Prize Longlist because it tells the stories of the women and the way that they're affected by their relationship with this man. Like I said, I'm doing brief here. This is a brief. These are brief little notes that I've taken that fit on a card. Second prediction is for a book that I took out of the library, tried to read, didn't have time, returned it to the library. I'm desperate to read because it's by an author whose last book I read and really loved, and that is Shy Creatures by Claire Chambers. She wrote Small Pleasures, and I adored that book. And in fact, Small Pleasures was longlisted for the Women's Prize in 2021. So she's a British author. Shy Creatures is set in the UK in the 1930s and 40s, and it's mostly about this man, William, who is discovered by a therapist, I think. And it's about how he was kind of cloistered away with his spinster aunt or aunts. I'm not sure if it's singular or plural. And it's about the story of how this happened, how he ended up kind of being hidden away for 20 years or removed from society or removed himself from society. It sounds really good. I know I really trust Claire Chambers, and I do think that it would be a bit of a surprise if she wasn't on the Women's Prize longlist again, because I think this book has received quite an enthusiastic response from those who have read it. My next selection is Glyph by Ali Smith. I myself have never read anything by Ali Smith, and I think it might be time because this sounds so good. So this is a women's perspective on the near future as told in Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So I don't know if it's like a retelling or if it's like an extension or inspired by that book. Ali Smith won the Women's Prize in 2015 for her book How to Be Both, and she's a Scottish writer. And she's obviously very popular, very well known, and this book is getting a lot of buzz. So it might be one that I pick up anyway because it sounds really great. My fourth choice is Universality by Natasha Brown. I read Assembly by Natasha Brown a couple of years ago when it came out, and I was really impressed with Assembly. And I think a lot of people at that time were wondering why Assembly wasn't recognized by the Women's Prize. I think it's highly possible that this time around Natasha Brown will get this recognition. She's a Black British writer. In terms of social issues, she's dealt with racism, classism, and sexism in her books, and I think the same is true for this novel. So the premise of this story is that someone is murdered, in fact bludgeoned to death with a gold bar. So that sets the tone, and then from there I think that mystery unravels. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading this one, whether it's on the prize list or not, because I'm just really excited that Natasha Brown wrote something else, and I would read anything Natasha Brown writes. I really hope she gets the recognition that I think she deserves by being listed this year. I couldn't avoid including Intermezzo by Sally Rooney in my predictions list. I'm be surprised if there's anyone who doesn't have Intermezzo. It's kind of like James was last year for the Booker Prize. Not saying that Intermezzo is equivalent to James, but I just think that Sally Rooney is probably going to be recognized. Her other book, Normal People, was longlisted in 2019. She's obviously an Irish writer, and I think there's usually quite a bit of Irish representation on the Women's Prize longlist, and I do have, I think, 4 Irish novels in my predictions list. This is the first of the 4. It's about 2 brothers after the loss of their father in their 20s, and it's about chess. I haven't read it yet. I can't believe I haven't read it yet. I don't know. I've never read anything by Sally Rooney, so I'm wondering if this is where I'll start, or if I'll start with Normal People. I will be surprised if Intermezzo is not on the list. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but I think it would be surprising if her book wasn't on the list. Another Irish writer that I think could be potentially on the long list and a past winner of the Women's Prize is Emir McBride. She won in 2014 for A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, which I have not read. The book that she has out that's eligible this year is The City Changes Its Face, and it's a sequel of sorts to another book that she wrote. So this is the only book that I'm picking on my predictions list that is the sequel. But I think these prize lists, or these prize long lists, they often will include sequels. There's a bit of controversy around that, which I'm not going to get into at the moment, but I do think that it's possible that this will be there. It's set in 1996, and it explores the relationship between a 40-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman. So it's very topical in terms of the kinds of books that we've seen on the prize list, the women's prize list in the past. Wow, maybe I should always make cue cards for my videos, because it is making it quite a bit more efficient in terms of filming and being organized. So next on my list is The Anthropologist by Achigol Savas. It's Achigol Savas, it's Savas's third novel, but I don't know if I'm put this on my list because it's just wishful, like I really want to read this and it's been on my radar for quite some time, or if I truly think that it will be selected. I think it's different and it represents a different experience than some of the other books that I've already talked about. It's about a young immigrant couple and how they navigate their life in the new city where they've moved to, and it's an unnamed city, so it's meant to be a universal experience. And I've heard some really fantastic things about this, so I'm thinking that it might be kind of a wild card that could possibly get in there. It'd be cool if it did. It sounds really good. This next book I also think is a bit of a wild card, but it would be really cool to see it make the list. This Motherless Land by Nikki May. This is described as being a retelling of Mansfield Park meets The Vanishing Half. So I don't know, that definitely gets the gears going in my brain. Nikki May is an Anglo-Nigerian author about a young girl from Nigeria who loses her mother and her brother in a fatal car crash. And then she gets sent away by her father, who is overcome, to England to live with aunt and cousins, and I would imagine it has a lot of elements of family drama and adjusting to this new environment. So it's set in Somerset and Lagos, and it goes back and forth, I think, between the two over 2 decades. Next up, I chose The Unwilding by Marina Kemp. She's a British author, and this book is said to be about motherhood, which we saw that theme quite a bit last year in the Women's Prize Longlist. So I think that thematically it's one that the judges might be looking at. It's also set in Italy and also in London and in Appalachia, so it spans different regions. So motherhood is actually the central theme of this one, and it's very deeply explored according to the reviews that I read. Nemone, who's the youngest daughter in what is a very flawed family, is the narrator, and she has a friendship with another woman named Zoe, who's a young writer who had been praised by Nem's father, and it goes back and forth from the past one summer in Sicily to this main character's experiences in the present in her friendship with this woman Zoe. And it feels like really women's prize material to me. Another book that is centered around motherhood that I chose for my list is Raw Content by Naomi Booth. Booth is a British author, and the story is set in Yorkshire, and it's said to be a very raw and real account of early motherhood. So I just thought, hey, that sounds like some of the books we read last year. Not that the prize should repeat necessarily these themes, but clearly the Women's Prize is representing a certain experience. So I think that it's possible that perhaps not all of my choices about the themes of motherhood, but at least one of my choices about the themes of motherhood might appear. I try to have some logic to my selections, but it's not easy. I'm not that great at this prediction stuff. I've also selected Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. I read Black Cake a couple of years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think Charmaine Wilkerson is a very accessible author, and I think for that reason it's quite possible that the Women's Prize would select her book, because they do a mix of very literary and more accessible authors. Charmaine Wilkerson is a Caribbean author, and Black Cake was about the lives of, the life of a young girl and her family, and this book is meant to be kind of an extension of that in terms of the type of story. It's written from multiple points of view. It's about several generations of a family. It's about grief and trauma and social justice. In terms of the plot, it centers around the unsolved crime of a young girl, Ebby's brother, who was shot. And this protagonist, Ebby, who was there when her brother was killed because she heard the gunshot. She flees to France, and it's the unraveling of this mystery about this shooting. And it uncovers the family's story through the attempt to solve that mystery. I've chosen two more Irish books, which are both debut novels, which I realize means that they maybe have less of a possible chance at being listed, but I do think that they deal again with themes that the Women's Prize should be including on their long list. First is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. This is about a woman who flees her abusive partner, I believe with her 2 young children, and she kind of doesn't know where she's fleeing to, and it exposes through the telling of her story a really broken social system, and it explores the experience of women who are in abusive marriages. It sounds like it would be a really hard read, but a really important read. And then my other choice is Exile by M.A. Walsh, another Irish writer, a debut novel. This is a coming-of-age story, and it's meant to be quite raw, and it's set in the aughts, and it just sounds really good. The protagonist sounds really interesting, and yeah, and I think this is similar to Megan Nolan in terms of the tone, and I think it's it has a possible shot of being on the list. I just have 3 more on my list. It was hard to make decisions at this point. I've included Behind You is the Sea by Susan Moody Durrag. She's American and she lives in Baltimore, and the story revolves around 3 main families of immigrant Palestinians. And I think this will be topical potentially, so maybe the Women's Prize will stay away from it, but it sounds really good, and I think there's also perhaps the potential for the Women's Prize to want to lean into this kind of a story. It sounds really good. Similarly, I've also chosen A Good Girl by Aria Aber. She's an American, and this is another debut, but I've been hearing so much buzz about it, I decided to include it on my list. This is about Neela, it's another coming-of-age story about Neela, who's growing up in Berlin. So it's set in Berlin. Neela is the daughter of Afghan refugees, and so it tells her story and their story. There's a Kafka reference in the summary, so I absolutely had to include it. Good Girl is described as being a story of love and family, raves and Kafka, staying up all night and surviving the mistakes of youth. I'm very like personally motivated when I make these decisions. It's not good. I need to be more objective. No, I really do think Good Girl could make the list. And then finally, the last book that I chose in the 16 books that I've selected is another debut, which I think stands a potential chance because I've heard really fantastic things about it, or I've read really fantastic things about it. It's The Artist by Lucy Steeds. She's a British writer. This is a debut. The Artist is set in the French countryside in the 1920s, and it follows an aspiring journalist, Joseph, who gets invited by his favorite artist to travel to his home and write an article on him, or so he thinks. When Joseph arrives, he finds that the artist has no idea he is coming, and he is in fact invited by the artist's niece, Eddie. So Eddie becomes the central character, and I think it explores the fallout of living through the Great War. That's what I've heard is something that is a main feature of this novel. But it also is telling the story of Eddie, is the assistant to the artist in this very isolated French countryside setting. So through Eddie, the author is exploring women's place in the artist's world at this time, which sounds to me like great Women's Prize material. There you have my 16 books that I'm predicting. I'm not expecting to get all of them correct, but man, did it open up my TBR to new and fantastic options coming up. I really hope to see some of these on the list. I want Natasha Brown for sure to be there. I think it would be a surprise if Sally Rooney is not on the list. I'd be really excited also to see something like Good Girl or another of the coming of age stories that I've suggested, and I would love it to see also some representation of immigrant experiences, either the anthropologist or Behind You is the Sea. But we shall find out. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know in the comments below what you think. It's a very exciting time. I can't wait to see the list when it comes out and make the comparisons, and yeah, start reading some of these wonderfully fantastic books. Bye for now. I believe it's being announced March 6th. Of course, I get in front of the camera and all my information that is in my head comes into question. I think I know what I'm saying. I think I've researched it. I think I've got those details clear in my mind, and I turn the camera on and my brain says, you might want to check that. Somebody needs to write a book for the Women's Prize about brain fog, because it's a thing. I'm sure someone already has. And she deals with the issues of race and class and sex in her books. Usually in terms of social commentary, she deals with race, class, and sex in her books. I want to say sex. My dog is trying to pull a blanket out of the basket. He's such a nutso. That will be included in the women's